Video is going to go into detail on quadratic functions and solving them by factoring, but specifically when the a value does not equal 1. And if you remember, in a quadratic equation, it would look like x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals y. And we look at the number in front of the x squared and we call that a. And most of the time, we've been working with problems where this value is 1. This video is going to cover situations where this number is not 1. Okay, and these have the potential to be a little bit more difficult than what we've been doing before. A quick reminder, when we're looking for solutions to quadratic equations, we are looking for the x-intercept, or what we will frequently call the zeros, because it's where the function is equal to 0. So make sure you keep that in mind as we start working on some of these problems. Before we get into situations where the a value is not 1, let's solve one problem by factoring when the a value is 1. And this is the same graph that we looked at on the first slide. And if you remember from the last video, I looked at the 4 individual factors to solve. And we cared a lot about 1 times 3 and 2 times 4 when we're creating our pairs of factors. Now, the 1 times 3 in this situation gives us the x squared term. And the only way to make the number 1 is 1x times 1x. So the first column will always just be 1x or just x. Then to create the middle term, we need to look at the factors of the final term, which in this case is 18. So we had 1 times 18, 2 times 9, and 3 times 6. And we needed a way to create negative 9 from those factors. But because this was a positive sign, that means that we need to either be adding 2 positives or adding 2 negatives. In this case, we're going to add 2 negatives, negative 3 plus negative 6. And our final product looked like this. We then could solve that by using the zero product property, setting both of these equal to 0, and finding our x value. Now, if any of this looks unfamiliar, make sure you step back and watch the previous video, which covered this situation. We notice here that our zeros matched our answers from factoring, which should always be true. But what if that a value is not 1? Well, the good news is the factoring process will be almost identical to what we've done before, but there is one extra step. We still care a lot about factor 1 times factor 3 and factor 2 times factor 4. We're still trying to create this middle term by adding or subtracting, but here's what's different. When we create our 2 pairs of parentheses, instead of this number and this number always being 1, we're now trying to create a 6. So we are going to look at the factors of 6, and we're going to look at the factors of 12. So instead of just looking at the final number, we're going to look at the factors of the first number, or a, and our third number, or c. Well, the factors of 6 are 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. And the factors of 12 are 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. Now, right here is the hardest but most important step. We are trying to create the middle term, which in this case is positive 6. We notice that this number is a negative, so we are subtracting. So we want to create a 6 from pairs of factors. And so you need to do one number from this column times one number from this column minus one number from this column times the other. And you have to use the pairs times each other. So for example, if I wanted to do this pair times this pair here, I could do 3 times 2, like this, and I could do 2 times 6, and we would want to subtract, and we're trying to create a positive 6. In this case, we would get 6 minus 12, which is a negative 6, so it does not work. So we're trying to create a positive 6 here. So what we could do is we could use this pair of factors and this pair of factors to create a positive 6. And you'll notice on this problem there are actually multiple ways to solve it. So if you saw a different one, that is totally fine. But what I can do is I can do 3 times 4. If I notice 1 from here times 1 from here, minus, because this number is a negative, so we need 1 positive and 1 negative, I would do 2 times 3. Now I notice that the first number in each column are our factors of A, which is 6, and the second column is our factors of C. Now I get 12 minus 6, and there I got my positive 6. Now I have to put this problem into our parentheses in order to solve it correctly. So I know that the first numbers to create 6 have to be 2 times 3. So I would put here 2x and 3x, because that will give me 6x squared. So the first number is taken care of. But in this problem, I need to do a 3 times a 4, and it has to be a positive 4. Now, if I put the 4 here, I will never multiply it times this 3. You only multiply by what's in the opposite parentheses. So the 4 has to go here to create a positive 12 in this situation, x. Then the opposite number has to be a negative 3. Now, the good news about this style of factoring is you can always check your answer by multiplying out. So I would get minus 6x plus 12x minus 12. And I can simplify the middle to get 6x squared plus 6x minus 12 equals 0, which is what we started with, so our factoring must be correct. Now, the last step that almost everybody forgets at least once is we need to solve our problem using the zero product property, which means I need to set each of these equal to 0. So I will do 2x plus 4 equals 0, and I will do 3x minus 3 equals 0, and then I'm going to solve each of these equations for x. This equation, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. 2x equals negative 4. I divide by 2, and I get x equals negative 2. Second problem, I add 3 to both sides. I get 3x equals positive 3. Divide both sides by 3. So x equals positive 1. I can check my answer just like I did in the last set of videos by using Desmos. And you notice here I have graphed the equation. It's hard to see on the edge. But 6x squared plus 6x minus 12. And I could put this as equal to 0, or I can just leave it here on Desmos. To actually see what the graph looks like, I can zoom in and look around. But I only really care about where it intersects the x-axis, which here is positive 1, which was one of our solutions. And we also get negative 2, which was our other solution. So we have solved it correctly. Now, this is a very hard concept, so I would strongly recommend watching the video retake, regardless of what your final score is. And if you choose to watch the video retake, regardless of your score, I will give you 10 SPs for that. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know.